Hey everybody, good morning and welcome back to another episode of the Demio Discover show. You've got David Abrams here, one of the co-founders of Demio, along with Josh Pigford, the founder of Baremetrics, which provides subscription analytics and insights for an advanced understanding of your business. Baremetrics is just an amazing company, something that we use pretty much every day in our business. It's critical, actually, I should say, to our business because we look at it every day on our numbers. So I just want to say, Josh, thanks so much for making it. Also, for those of you guys listening, the blog is amazing, just amazing resources on there. And one of our other favorite tools is your Open Startups tool. We use it all the time to look at other startups that are doing really transparent-based marketing and looking at, they put all their numbers up basically of their SaaS analytics, and you guys can go through and just scroll through great companies, $1 million plus SaaS companies, stuff like that. So it's a great tool. And Josh, just excited to have you here, and thanks for jumping on, I should say.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Hey, everybody. And we do have chat public, so go ahead and say hey and jump in, and we'll go ahead and jump right into this call today. And so, Josh, I talked a little bit about what Baremetrics is as a whole, but, maybe tell us a little bit about, why you got started on this journey, who you're targeting with it, and kind of just, more about what your mission is.
Sure. So back in 2013, right around this time, 2013, I had two other SaaS products kind of in the survey space that I've been running for a couple of years. And back then, like there wasn't really anything out there. I mean, obviously metrics like MRR and lifetime value and churn, all this stuff existed. But like calculating them was kind of a beast. So lots of time in spreadsheets, manually doing stuff, or building like these little internal things that were a lot of work just to maintain, and there just wasn't any software out there to make it easy to get this stuff without needing a ton of work. So I had started building this little internal thing because there wasn't anything out there, and I was tired of like manually inputting stuff in spreadsheets. And Stripe was like, at this point, was starting to gain some pretty good steam. Mm-hmm. And so their API was becoming like people were starting to kind of like figure out what sort of interesting stuff you could do with it. And I started looking at that and thought, hey, I could just pull all the data from Stripe and get all these numbers. And that's what I did. And so that's kind of what got things kicking. Yeah, 4 years ago. It was like mid-October, and then I had the idea in mid-October, started working on it, and then launched it in mid-November 2013.
Wow, you did that really fast. Are you a developer yourself, or you just had someone come in and help with that project?
No, so that's generous to call myself a developer, but I mean, I did everything. I coded everything. For the first probably 5-6 months, I was doing 100% of everything: design, development, front and back end, support, marketing.
Wow,
everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were initially just scratching your own itch. You saw the problem that you had. Stripe was coming up. You designed it and developed it yourself. I mean, it makes sense that we did the same thing as far as solving our own kind of pain point. But did you have a specific target market in mind, or were you just going after, like, at that point it was just everyone? I just want to get some answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time it was very much me scratching my own itch. So like, I was the founder needing access to this data, and I didn't have some huge team to build any like internal analytics suite or anything. So I mean, the target market just sort of defaulted to that. Mm-hmm. And we can get into this more later. I mean, I think like that stayed, that sort of like the individual founder or the founder as the target market has been our target for the past few years, though. Mm-hmm. Like we're now shifting all that, but like, yeah, it stayed that, or has stayed that for quite a while.
Okay, that's awesome. So you're kind of just getting started. You have this product. How do you get it out there? What are you validating in the marketplace? What does that look like when you're just starting as a solo founder and you're doing everything?
Yeah. So I mean, the validation part for me was always just, will anybody pay for it? Yeah. I didn't do any sort of like beta list or like having a newsletter sign up thing to have to launch to. I had no list of anybody anywhere to reach out to as far as like announcing it. And at the time, like Product Hunt wasn't a thing. Like there was the extent of me getting it out there was just Twitter. And I mean, at the time, I don't know. I think I probably had like 1,000 or 2,000 followers or something, and a lot of those were other founders. So I mean, like for me, that was where the initial sort of snowball got started. Was just I had been over like the 3 or 4 weeks between the idea and me launching it. I had been talking about it a ton on Twitter, just random, like tweeting out images of the logo that I was working on, and like reaching out to random friends who are founders and asking them to try it out. So that was sort of the extent of my validation, was just like, hey, will anybody sign up and pay for it? And yeah, like day one, had plenty of people sign up for it. So
that's awesome. And you had been cultivating that Twitter list for a while, or just like in the community?
Not intentional. I wasn't like specifically trying to build up any kind of Twitter following. It was just from being on Twitter from like almost the start of Twitter. I had more than 10 people following me. So I mean, I've been building stuff for the web for 15, 20, I mean, since I was in high school. So like, I've had like sort of this like small community of people anyways, just from being on the internet a long time.
Got it. And it totally makes sense. I mean, we did something similar using social media. We used Facebook as kind of our primary thing, but we had like a Facebook following that we just kind of talked to. And it wasn't like we intentionally built it, but it really, really helps to get that initial momentum. So you're getting some initial customers in, you have your MVP that you built yourself. What are you doing for the next, few months as far as getting in customers? How do you get your first 100? Do you have a marketing strategy, or still just word of mouth at this point?
Yeah. So the first, it was still very much word of mouth, and it stayed that way for a long time. I think I'm trying to think of the timeline of. So I was kind of like just shooting from the hip. Let's see, that was like November to December, January, February. It's about 3 months of just like me doing not much of anything, but like trying to build the product that I think people wanted, or I was learning people wanted.
Yeah.
And then 3 or 4 months afterwards, I kind of like, I got a better idea of what people were wanting to use this for. And this is like feedback coming from paying customers. This is not like, I've got 100 people that are trying it out, but they're not paying me anything. This is like people paying money. I mean, like, I think our first customer was actually like a $250 a month business. And so I'm getting like that kind of feedback. And so I decide to scrap everything and rebuild it from scratch. And so I did that. And like that sort of gave us this next sort of big push, because I was solving a problem initially, like giving sort of easy access to these high level metrics, but realized pretty quickly that people wanted to go a little bit deeper, or a lot deeper. And so, so that's when I, scrapped everything and rebuilt it so that you could dig deeper. And then from there, that kind of like the snowball kind of kept going. And then from there, like that was also the point where like Baremetrics needed this demo. Let me roll down my blinds here, because I've got this big, nasty reflection here.
I got the same thing off the building next to me. Just
yeah. So at that point, I realized, like, when we relaunched the new the new application, I needed a demo for it to show off what it could do. And the way to do that, the easiest, i.e. the laziest way, was for me just to make my own company's Baremetrics dashboard public. And so that kind of kicked off this whole transparency thing that really, like, that's when the angle of the graph changed early on, because then like Buffer jumped on board and made theirs public, and this whole snowball thing.
That's awesome. That was a stroke of genius. You don't even intentionally mean to do it. You just kind of, we're looking to get that demo out and made it perfect. But that's awesome. So you probably got a lot of organic sales that way from people checking out the different open startup graphs, and that kind of kept going and going. So at some point, when did you decide to raise versus continuing to just do things yourself and bootstrap? Because you were obviously having growth there, but I know you did an initial round.
Yeah. So let's see, November, December, January, February, March. So about 6 months in, I hired my first employee, but that was still, I mean, I was still bootstrapped, and had turned down, after I made our dashboard public and Buffer made theirs public and started like getting a little bit more buzz around it. Certainly had more people reaching out to like investors wanting to have conversations, and I was turning all that stuff down. The terms of that stuff was never like interesting to me, and I didn't feel like I even needed it at the time. So, but like, so yeah, 6 months in, had one full-time employee, couple of like part-time contractors doing stuff, and then Stripe approached me. So this is at the time we were just Stripe, like it was a Stripe SaaS analytics for Stripe, like that was our tagline. So so Stripe reaches out because, again, like they're starting to get traction, and wanting to like push their API more, because obviously they're like this sort of API based company. They want people building cool stuff on their API because it makes Stripe more valuable. So they reach out and they start this thing called what was that thing called? The Stripe. Oh gosh, I'm gonna totally butcher it. It's like the Stripe platform fund thing. I don't know. But so they build this or create this fund with General Catalyst, who's a big VC, one of their big investors. So they create this fund with them to invest in Stripe products. I mean, like now Slack has something similar too for people who want to build stuff on top of Slack. I mean, like that's sort of this common thing now. So they created this thing initially for Baremetrics, and that was, so I got 500,000 from that. Like the terms were really great because, again, I wasn't looking for funding, but it was like a $10 million valuation, and
wow.
So it was like, and it was via a safe, so it's like it's not like a convertible note. They're not getting any board seats. It's very much this like angel round kind of thing. And so the terms are great. So 500,000 at a $10 million valuation, like whatever, it's like free money, essentially. Like what do I care? Essentially 5%, whatever. So I was like, sure, why not? And
that's an amazing deal for being
right. And like that wasn't even anything like this is me having never raised any money. I hadn't looked for money. I didn't even know like what valuations anyways are sort of like and they threw all the numbers out, and I said, that sounds fantastic. Done. So we did that, and like that turned around really quick. And then all of a sudden I've got $500,000 sitting in my bank account. And so then I started hiring some people.
Awesome. Well, so let me, first of all, just so everyone knows, we talk about safe docs. That's a type of document that you use when you're doing funding. It came from Y Combinator. It's a really great way, if you guys are ever looking at raising money, it's a really great way to get people in on not a convertible note where it's like based on time. It's a really, we almost did that with the safe as well, but it's a really great document for you guys if you don't know what we're talking about. But cool. So you start hiring, and we started talking about this before the show happened, but you said, sometimes once you have that money, you have a new kind of stress. You have like this obligation to spend it. So what happens during this period, and kind of where does your growth curve go?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like hiring people is a long game, because you're not going to see an instant like, oh, we just hired Sally and our growth doubled. And that's not really how that works for most job roles. It can take 6 to 12 months for you to like really start, especially when you think of like an engineering role where it's like they're building stuff and working on things that like may not launch for many months down the road, and then like that doesn't actually get into the funnel of revenue and growth on stuff for months after that. I mean, like it's a very long road. And so when you we spent all that money on hiring people, and I think like at the time when the money came in, growth, when it like purely percentage based, was anywhere from like 15 to 30% month over month. Which, if you take that in a completely unrealistic way and say like, well, if we keep up 30% month over month growth for 12 months, then like we'll be making like $10 million a month by this time next year. And you're just like, of course it makes sense. Hire all the people. It'll be fine. And that's like the over optimism of most founders, certainly myself. So that was sort of like the mess we got ourselves into, was like hired a bunch of people. Then you've got this crazy burn rate, burning like, I don't know, I think at our worst, our burn rate was like $80,000 or $90,000 a month, which I mean, in VC land and like Silicon Valley, there's companies burning millions of dollars a month. You know, like that's nothing. But for a small SaaS company that's, you know, making $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month, it's a lot of money to burn.
A lot of red. It's a lot of
right.
red.
Yeah. A lot of red. And so that was like, that's the mess we got ourselves into, and ended up a year and a half later having to add more to the round, extra 300,000. So we ended up raising 800,000 in total to get ourselves out of that mess.
But, well, it sounds like you had a good fund and a good like investing team behind it that were kind of patient.
Sure. Well, and what was amazing about the extra 300,000 was like so General Catalyst came in for an extra 200, and then Bessemer threw in 100, and like they either one of them could have said like, you know what, we want some different terms on this because clearly you're doing this because you're about to go out of business. So and neither of them did. They both tacked it onto the original safe at the original valuation. Like, wow, it was all like they were just like, sure, here's some more money, and it worked out great. So
that's incredible.
To their point, like, you know, people give a lot of VCs a hard time, but like the VCs had nothing to do with the mess that we were in. That was 100% my due. You know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's incredible that you had such great people there that they really did have, you know, your back 100%. But that's great. So you saw the red, you saw the burn, and obviously that's a huge metric to look at, right? Is like net, it's like your net revenue, but also where's my burn rate for the month. And when people look forward, they optimistically, especially if you're using charts like in Baremetrics, and you're just looking at your next 12 months. Here's where we're going to be. But a lot of times people forget, you know, the churn numbers are going in, or what their burn is going to be, or, you know, getting into a market segment that's getting saturated. So growth and month over month growth reduces. What were the numbers that you were critically looking at during that time that you're like, oh shit, I need to do something different here? Like, were there things that you were specifically seeing, or was it just like, hey, we're spending a lot of money, we got to cut that down?
A lot of it came down to I had not been paying attention to, I mean, clearly, to the accounting side of the numbers enough. So I was paying attention. Obviously, I have at my fingertips all these revenue, sort of income-ish SaaS analytics very easily. Like, this was great. But like the expense part, I was not paying a whole lot of attention to. It was very much sort of this like, you know, I still see we've got $280,000 in the bank account. We're fine. But there was so I had been doing this like little spreadsheet thing that was like trying to forecast the next few months as far as income and expenses, you know, like basically P&L stuff. And I started to like question whether it was all that accurate. And like, maybe I'm not really accounting for all the things. And so like a buddy of mine mentioned someone he knew that was like, had started building these like SaaS forecast model things, and put me in touch with him. And so one thing led to another. He did something for us and then called me up and was like, hey man, stuff doesn't look good. And so that's when we kind of like, ship's on fire.
Yeah. So. Was he pointing out like a zero cash at your ZCD, or is it just more like where you're going with variable?
It's like, you know, like you're essentially taking the revenue metrics of MRR, churn, lifetime value, all that stuff, and then also bringing in the expenses and then forecasting the future based on growth rates and averages and all that stuff to try to get it, and known upcoming expenses and all that stuff. And I mean, at the end of the day, it was like I was just not doing a great job of tracking all the expenses that I actually had, and was being far too optimistic about our growth. And
got it. So when you look at that stuff and you had this conversation like, oh shit, what changes are you making? And then what did you see as kind of like the greatest results? Where is it like being able to reduce, were you focusing on reducing churn? Like what problems were you initially solving just looking at that and seeing that there was a fire coming up?
Well, so I think initially, I don't know. I mean, sorry, my dog's barking.
I got two.
Yeah. So usually they're snoring and not barking. But, so I don't know. I mean, like there's at the time we also had some churn issues. I mean, I think I don't remember exactly the timing on this, but give or take a few months. We were in the like 10 to 12% monthly churn, which
revenue or user?
Both. I mean, our it's about the same for us because our average revenue per user is $100, mostly. So those are usually kind of equal. So that was nasty. I mean, like from a churn perspective, but like we were trying to solve some of that stuff. It needed to happen like on the software side. There was just some like stability issues, and the way that we were calculating things at the time needed to change. And so we made all those changes. But I mean, really so much of the stuff that like we needed to fix from a number standpoint, it was on the accounting side. Like, you know, just things like burn rate and our expenses in general, like that stuff had to get fixed and changed or reduced or whatever. And so that's like really, I spent a lot more time in QuickBooks and Excel looking at profit and loss statements than I did on SaaS metrics at the time.
That's awesome. I mean, that's great to hear. A lot of people, you know, don't want to look at that stuff. And actually, David here has a great question. He asked, how early in the startup process do you think engaging in that type of business modeling would help? If you had to go back, would you change when you started looking?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm not, strangely enough, given I run a company that is about metrics and numbers, I'm not a numbers guy. Like like my wife and I, so there's a financial guy named Dave Ramsey who talks about how there's like the free spirit and the nerd in a relationship, and like the free spirit's like, whatever, the money's fine, we'll just spend it, it'll be fine. And then the nerd's like the one who does all the spreadsheet stuff. And my wife is the nerd and I'm the spreadsheet. Like she's the one who wants to like, it lives inside the spreadsheet and like loves doing that stuff. And I don't. And that's why I built Baremetrics, because I didn't want to spend any more time in a dang spreadsheet. So I think early on, I should have spent a lot more time in like the accounting side of things. And I don't know how, like, as far as when, I mean, there's a point where like it doesn't, especially if you're not if you've got profit early on, there's less urgency to do that, to like really focus on that stuff, because you're like, yes, like, you know, you could probably do more to like grow faster and have more profit, but you're not at the risk of going out of business, you know, when you're profitable from day one. So, and that's why like we had this huge push internally to get profitable so that we didn't have to like stress about that stuff.
So let's talk about that. To make a big push to get profitable, are you cutting expenses, letting people go? You now have this new 300K. Obviously, you're going to be a little bit wiser with that money. You know that there's a fire up ahead. Are you really focusing on marketing, or are you focusing again on just product stability? How do we reduce churn? Is it a pivot of the target customer? Like, what does that focus become?
So initially it was, we didn't have to let anybody go directly because of this. We did, I mean, everybody had to take a pay cut. I asked the whole team to take a 15% pay cut. I took a 30% pay cut. And the deal was we would do that until we were profitable.
Were you giving vesting bonuses for that, or it was just a pay cut straight?
No, well, yeah, I gave a little additional, I gave more stock options. As part of like an exchange. Yes. So that was the biggest thing we did to cut expenses. Now we also did this huge, like, let's go through the 100 different random products we're using and cut a ton of them out. And that saved some, but I mean, the biggest saving came from everybody taking a pay cut, because payroll is, for any company, is this, you know, is the biggest source of, right. So that was the only reasonable place to like really make a dent. So that's what did it for us.
Cool. So you're not changing anything on marketing. You're still using a lot of organic from.
No, and I mean, at the same time, I mean, it was interesting. So we had spent the prior, like the day that I asked or told the team like the sort of the mess we were in, we were like a week away from launching like the biggest sort of expansion Baremetrics had. Like we had for months, 4 or 5 months, had been working on the ability to support other platforms besides Stripe. So we've been working on that for so long, and we were a week away from launching it. And like, it's like, hey guys, I need everybody to take a 50% pay cut. We're about to go to business. Also, let's do this big push so we can launch this thing. And and the hope had been that like, hey, we expand to markets outside of Stripe. Like we now support Braintree and Recurly, et cetera. So, and the thought was like that would increase growth a bunch, but it didn't. It did some, and like long term, it was necessary to support that. But like, it didn't have the effect that I'd hoped it would, meaning that the team had to keep the pay cuts longer than my original estimate, which wasn't pleasant. But like to the team's credit, like they were all had the best attitudes I could have imagined about it.
So your story is so similar to our journey. We had to do the exact same thing. We've done promotions. We're like, oh, this is going to be the big thing. And, we had to keep everyone motivated. So what do you do during that time to keep your team motivated and Pardeep said here, like aligned to your goals? Like, how are you keeping them motivated through that time? Because that's obviously, you're balancing it with more vesting stock options and stuff like that. But still, it's a hard thing to digest as a team, especially when you're working so hard behind the scenes on these new updates. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And the motivating factors may have been different for each person on the team. I mean, I think for so many people on our team, like they weren't working for Baremetrics because they're like hoping for some massive payout. Like the stock options thing wasn't even really a necessity. Like it's not like anybody like demanded it. And like that's just not like this big emphasis within the company when it comes to like compensation. So I think for most people it was like a lot of our team had been with us for a couple of years already, and felt pretty invested in the product, and like we're proud of the stuff that they've been working on already. And clearly like we were on this track to get profitable anyways. Like it felt like there was this obvious light at the end of the tunnel anyways. So I think for most people, if there had not been this sort of like hope to latch onto that things would improve, then I think it would have been different. But like we were, had so much already in the pipeline and like we're growing regardless, that it was like, okay, like we can take a hit for a little while to keep this thing afloat, and then we'll be fine, which is what happened.
Yeah, a little temporary hit there, but that's awesome. So you guys you got the update out, you survived, you're getting there. You said you're at about 10 to 12% churn. Obviously a huge number. What are you guys doing to battle that? Obviously you said product stability stuff. Okay, so you're getting product in, take it down a couple of percentage points. You got the new update out, some more, percentage points. Because I think I looked the other day and you guys are at like 3% revenue churn.
Right.
You had a great number, obviously.
Yeah.
What are you doing to really hammer that down?
So at the time, I mean, like when we're in the middle of like, the ship is on fire, we're running out of money, we also need to launch this new update. When we launched the update to support all these other platforms, we're changing like that. There was a stability thing that happened, and like that we had been working on already for a long time, and we tweaked just like the way that we were calculating some stuff. So not that it like changed, obviously changing how you calculate MRR does not mean that a company actually has more or less money, but it's just like, it just sort of changes the way that it's reported in a way that maybe is more reasonable. So that also, all of this stuff kind of coincided, and all said and done, it's like that our churn just went down because I would say stability and like the usefulness of the data improved a lot too. So
nice.
That's probably the biggest.
That's awesome. You guys also do, this is just something that randomly popped in my head, but you guys do this great update with your Slack integration where you like put in every Monday, you put in like all the stats updates. You also email on Mondays. Did you guys see a big kind of usage increase or any churn drop just from having more ROI specific data, like just fed to users all the time? 'Cause I think that's such a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I don't know. We've done the email stuff from almost the beginning. The Slack stuff was like just a natural extension of that. I don't know that we saw any specific like, oh, we launched this Slack integration and churn went down. I think it's sort of a lot of stuff that we do and certainly others do isn't so much about like improving something as much as it is like this is just a necessary thing to like make the product continue to be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we could have kept the thing that we had launched with 4 years ago and just slowly died. Or we can keep like adding stuff on to like maintain the level of growth and the sort of usefulness and value that customers expect, you know.
Definitely. I think usefulness and value, I think those are the key words there. So what do you think, kind of looking at open startups, looking at probably a lot of these different accounts, I know you talk to users all the time. What do you think are some key metrics that you think most entrepreneurs don't pay enough attention to?
I mean, profit. I don't know. Like I think a lot of businesses get stuck on specific numbers that feel valuable. So that could be things like conversion rates on trials, or you know, I think if we're talking just like SaaS metrics, I would say churn is a thing that most people like to kind of like sugarcoat a little bit. And we get asked all the time, like, do you support this XYZ way of calculating churn? Which for most, it's like, you're just asking for a different way to make like this pile of crap look okay. And no, like you have a churn problem, and like recalculating it doesn't change the fact that your customers are leaving in droves. So I think churn's a big one, especially when you're like double digit churn, like you've got some sort of product problem that you need to address. So that, and then profit really goes a long way.
Profit does, 100%. It reduces a lot of stress too.
It does.
All right, so you guys are almost at the 100K MRR mark, which is incredible. I think when we started following you, you guys were at like 40. So congratulations on like all this growth. But what do you think one of the biggest challenges or failures that you faced to get there, to like continue that growth, and that you turn into a lesson that you guys just take forward now with you?
What we talked about earlier about the not paying enough attention to expenses, really. And I think that can still be the case, even if you're a profitable company. What happens, like same sort of situation when you have a bunch of savings in the bank. Like maybe you've been buckled down, you've been profitable for a year, and you've like saved up a couple $100,000 in the bank. Well, you can still spend the same. It's the same thing as like getting $100,000 from an investor, in that you have an urge to spend it past your ability to maintain that level of spending. So I think like for me, that was just the biggest lesson, was like to slow it down on spending, especially on hiring. Like I feel like as a founder, I tied a lot, and I still like struggle with this, like tie a lot of my perception of our success to the size of our team. So there's this feeling of like, we need more people on the team because that implies that Baremetrics is doing really well because we've got 50 people or whatever. So I think fighting that and like being okay with having a smaller team, and knowing that like the fact that most people, when we tell them like we're just 8 people, they're like, holy crap, like you've been able to do a lot with just 8 people, or less even. So I think like becoming okay with not using that as like a indicator of success.
Totally. I was actually just listening to Rework this morning from the Basecamp guys,
yeah.
And they're very specific. They're like, there's this weird like industry ego about the size of your team that like represents your success.
Yeah.
And we wanted to go the opposite way. We wanted to have a small team and be okay with that, because that meant more profitability and less stress.
Because it's like, if you think, a business has an infinite number of variables. And when I think of variables, I think of like little knobs to twist and turn and levers to pull and all. Like an employee is the hardest knob to adjust. Like you can't, marketing, like paid advertising, like all that stuff, you can sit there and twiddle and tweak into oblivion and fine, whatever. There's no real risk. But like you can't just stop paying someone, and that's the biggest source of expenses for any company. So I think like waiting as long as possible to hire for a given role, man, that's hard to do, but it'll pay off in the long run.
Awesome. I love that advice. And we're going to jump over to some quick fire questions, which is just going through some questions you can answer as fast as you can. So, but before I do that, I would love audiences already started putting in some questions here. I want to answer those before we kind of shift the way we're answering. Pardeep here had a question specifically about what you guys are doing on your website. You have a 20% discount for those who sign up within the first few days, I believe. How well is this working for you and you guys?
We don't do what I'm trying to remember. We test this stuff all the time.
Like scarcity driven offers?
Well, yeah, like we used to do this thing where it was a progressively we reduce the discount. Like day one, there's like a 15% discount. Day two, when you log back in, it's like now it's 14% and then 13. Like every day it goes down. And that was like an interesting experiment. But like in B2B stuff, like even the discount for like signing up early, like there's just not enough volume to like have a statistically relevant answer to that. Like it's like in B2C, you might have millions of signups in a week. And yeah, you can do all sorts of really cool tests for that. But like B2B, we might have 50. Yeah. And like it takes months to get any kind of relevant result from that stuff. And even then it's sort of like, there's probably other stuff we could do that makes a bigger business impact than like tweak the percentage or offer the percentage or not. So we test that stuff every now and then just to see what the response is like. But I inconclusive is like the answer there.
Well, Pardeep, I hope that answered your question. Inconclusive.
I'm sorry.
David said, how do you feel about the differences between the excitement of the start compared to the move to stability? And I think this is a question that most entrepreneurs, well, not a question, but a thing that most entrepreneurs fall into, which is the excitement into the stability phase.
Yes. So for me, I love starting things. I mean, love it. So, but to me, it's like I have to figure out what is it about the starting of something that I love. And for me, that's like, it's like being creative with something, like getting to like try all this stuff and like it's learning something new and having all these ideas and getting to make the ideas become a reality. And so the question is like, okay, I can't keep starting Baremetrics, obviously. It's 4 years old, like there's no more starting it. But there's a few things, sort of ways to like fill the void for me. So there's the learning side of things. So I'm still like learning new stuff every day with Baremetrics because I don't know what I'm doing. So there's like me figuring stuff out that's still really exciting. And we've still got tons of stuff that we're doing and changing and whatever with Baremetrics. Like it's still this really exciting thing for me. On top of that, like I have to find a creative outlet outside of Baremetrics or software in general. And so as long as like I'm finding maybe that's like woodworking. So it's just making stuff that like also sort of fills the void from that. I think trying to just like run a stable company can maybe feel like it would be boring, but there's some other stuff that comes in that kind of helps level all that out.
Totally understand and agree. And I think that you got to be aware of like what you're starting and why you're starting it. Like there has to be a why behind it. I would love to know your why of like why you started Baremetrics. But I think a lot of times when we're in the mode of like chasing money, especially, like we have all these ideas to start projects to make more money. And that's just like the worst way to do it because you're just going to get caught in all these projects that you hate. You're not going to have the excitement and passion. I think it's a wonderful idea to have all those outside hobbies and stuff because you're not taking away from like business centered thought, like where your mind is actually thinking of thought because you want to put all that towards one major kind of business, and then everything else you can have fun with creating and stuff like that. And so let me ask you real fast, what is your why? Like what is the passion that keeps you moving day in and day out here?
It still comes down to like just making stuff. So Baremetrics is like a thing like that we're making. And the fact that other people find value in that and that we get to help other businesses, continue to business, that's sort of the why for me.
Awesome. Love that. Awesome, guys. Do you have any other questions before we get into quick fire? And then we'll be wrapping up after that. So make sure you guys put in your questions now. I'll just wait because it's going to change some of the feeling of the show as we get into the quick fire questions. And hey, Karen, by the way. Cool. All right, guys. Well, let's jump into the quick fire questions. So these are just little short snippets of questions that you can just answer as fast as possible. No long explanation needed, but just super helpful. These are all very valuable things that we take away from each show. But how much do you read during the week, each week?
I read, I probably read a few hours a week. I don't read any business books though.
No business books. That's awesome to hear. What's your top book recommendation right now? Any industry?
My default book recommendation is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Nice. I'm gonna have to look that one up. What would you tell your younger self starting this business, Baremetrics?
Pay attention to profit and expenses.
Love it. What's one characteristic you've had to discover on your journey that's made you stronger as an entrepreneur?
Not caring at all what anyone else like thinks about the business, or like lots of people have opinions on your business, especially when you're running like a transparent business, and just not really giving a rip what other people think about it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. Best advice you would give someone just starting an online business or a SaaS company today?
To don't chase fads, or like just because you see someone else doing something and they're doing well, you won't be able to copy their success, and you also get really bored. I see a lot of new entrepreneurs doing that, like trying to figure out what they want to do. They just know, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, or whatever that means. And so they start looking at other people who have had success and they're like, I'll copy that, and then I'll have some similar level of success, which is insane. So just like, and also don't be afraid to kill the stuff that you're working on. Like your idea that you have now is likely not your best idea. So just like keep iterating on stuff. So.
Love it. Love it. All right. And last question. What's one thing you're looking most forward to in technology?
There's a bunch of stuff, man. I'm gonna say machine learning and autonomous cars.
Ooh, autonomous cars is gonna be insane. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
But cool. I really just want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today, to join us live, and we'll get this episode out there for everyone to listen to as well who wasn't able to attend today. But thanks so much, Josh, man. You're absolutely awesome. I learned a ton on this. And yeah, we love your product. If you guys aren't using Baremetrics yet, definitely go check it out. It's an incredible platform, and definitely the open startup area. You can see what other companies are doing. It's really incredible. But Josh, thank you again so much.
Hey, thanks for having me, David.
All right, no problem. Talk to you guys all very soon, and have a wonderful rest of the day.